Hello, how's it going, everybody? Today we'll be jumping into Esther chapter 6. So let me get that text up on screen here for you. All right, so yesterday we saw Esther become queen, right? King Ahasuerus, or as my Bible also said, it could have been Xerxes in the Persian, because Ahasuerus was the Hebrew name. He had gotten rid of Queen Vashti because she didn't come into his chambers when he called for the feast, right? And now Esther is the queen, and Haman wants to kill all the Jews, and he hates seeing Mordecai in the position that he is. So he wants Mordecai dead as well. So Esther has now agreed to help the Jews. Mordecai asked Esther to help out. Maybe he's like, maybe this is why God put you in this position. So Esther is going to help out, and today we're going to be jumping into chapter 6. We left off with Esther hosting a banquet for Haman and the king. And Haman thinks he's on top of the world right now. He thinks like, yo, I just got invited two times to a banquet with the queen and the king, a private banquet with just them. So he thinks he's doing something great. But he's about to find out that the queen's not really on his side. So let's jump into chapter 6. And let's get started.
That night, the king could not sleep. So one was commanded to bring the book of the records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, the doorkeepers who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. Then the king said,
"What honor or dignity has been bestowed upon Mordecai for this?
Nothing has been done for him."
Who is in the court?"
Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to suggest that the king hang Mordecai.
Like, what are the chances of that? He just couldn't sleep, so he's like, hey, give me something boring. Read me something boring so I'll fall asleep. So he's like, okay, the records of the Chronicles. And they stumbled across this, what Mordecai had done for him. What are the chances of that? Like, this is critical. We'll find out. We'll see as it continues on, but this is critical for the story. Right? Because Haman wants Mordecai hanged
on the gallows that he had prepared for him.
Let me go back.
On the outer court of the king's palace to suggest that the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. The king's servant said to him,
"Haman is there, standing in the court."
"Let him come in."
So
like,
Haman
look at
came
the chances of that. What are
and
the
the
chances
king
of this?
asked him,
"What shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor?"
Now Haman thought in his heart,
"Whom would the king delight to honor more than me?"
I mean, he just had a private banquet with the king and the queen.
For the
He's on top
man
of
whom
the
the
world.
king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought which the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, which has a royal crest placed on its head.
So Haman came to the court to tell the king, hey, we're going to set up these gallows and we need to hang this guy Mordecai. But what is he actually doing? He's telling the king how to bless Mordecai, to give him a robe of the king and ride him through the streets. See, like the irony in this? What are the chances? Just because he couldn't sleep one night and he asked to be read the Chronicles and he found out what happened. See, that's God at work right there.
Crest placed on its head. Then let this robe and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor. Then parade him on horseback through the city square and proclaim before him, 'Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor.'"
Hurry. Take the robe and the horse, as you have suggested, and do so for Mordecai, the Jew who sits within the king's gate. Leave nothing undone of all that you have spoken.
Yo, I'd love to see Haman's face when he was told that.
So Haman took the robe and the horse, arrayed Mordecai, and led him on horseback through the city square, and proclaimed before him,
Thus shall it be done to the man
And
whom
Haman
the
has to
king
be the one to do
delights to honor.
Dang, that must have been a hard pill for him to swallow.
Afterward, Mordecai went back to the king's gate. But Haman hurried to his house.
Imagine how Mordecai must have felt, because he knows Haman's tendencies, right? That's the whole reason why he didn't want Esther to. That's the whole reason why they changed Esther's name, why he wanted her to hide her nationality, because of Haman, right? Because he knew Haman had something against the Jews. And for Mordecai to know all this and then be paraded around town by Haman, and then Haman saying all these praises, what the king told him to say and all this stuff. Dang, Mordecai must have enjoyed that too. I'm not going to lie. He probably enjoyed that.
But Haman hurried to his house, mourning and with his head covered. When Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him.
Right, because his wife and his friends were the one that suggested the gallows, right?
His wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him,
If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him.
While they were still talking with him, the king's...
If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but you will surely fall before him. Is that because the reputation of God is widely known? They know that the Jewish people, God has their backs, and he's pulled them out of the most, unfortunate circumstances, and they've always come out on top. It could be the case. Let's see what this Bible's got to say. What is this? Chapter 6, verse 13. The issue of the ongoing survival of the Jewish people is in the point of this verse. Haman's wife and friends told Haman that he would not prevail for the very reason of Mordecai's Jewish descent. The Hebrew wording is quite strong. The meaning is that he will most certainly fall. Well, it didn't really go into what I wanted it to go into, but I'm going to assume that's the case. The reputation of the Jewish people is that, miraculous things happen around them, right? They always, somehow, even when they're at their lowest lows, something happens, so they climb back on top. And if you have begun to fall with this guy, right? If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, if you've begun to fall before Mordecai, the avalanche is going to start, right? It's just the snowball is going to come down the hill, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're not going to prevail because God has his back.
Eunuchs came and hastened to bring Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared.
Oh, that's it. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuch came and hastened to bring Haman to the banquet which Esther prepared. Okay, so the second banquet. Remember, Esther invited Haman and the king to another banquet to ask what she really wanted to ask, that she didn't ask the first time. So it's all about to go down right now in this banquet.
So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther. And on the second day, at the banquet of wine, the king again said to Esther,
What is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what?
This is going to come out of left field for Haman. Haman already had to do with all this with Mordecai today, and now to find out that Mordecai is Esther's uncle, the queen's the queen's uncle. Like, his mind is already going to be blown. He's going to be broken to pieces after hearing that.
It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Up to half the kingdom. It shall be done.
If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. Had we been sold as male and female slaves, I would have held my tongue, although the enemy could never compensate for the king's loss.
Who is he?
Oh, come on, King. Are you slow or what? How do you not know? It's like, who's the only people that are to be annihilated and killed? You know, I mean, maybe it's just not on his mind at all, so he didn't think of it. But what does this mean? Had we been sold as male and female slaves, I would have held my tongue. So she was fine with her people going into slavery, they're just not killed, although the enemy could never compensate for the king's loss. What does that mean? Chapter 4, verse 7. Esther repeated her address of chapter 5, verse 8, and now added her request. Let my life be given. Esther asked the king to spare her life and the lives of her people. This latter appeal was an impassionate plea to the king, in which she also disclosed her true identity to him for the first time. Esther told the king that she and her fellow Jewish people have been sold, referring to Haman's bribe to the king in chapter 3, verse 9. Well, he seems like he didn't get that point yet. Maybe you have to wait on. But this commentary is for verse 3 and 4. And yeah, he didn't even get that she was Jewish up till now. But what is this? Had we been sold as male and female slaves, I would have held my tongue. Although the enemy could never compensate for the king's loss. But what is the king losing? I mean, he would be losing if all the Jews died. But it said, if they were just sold as slaves. Okay, so sold, although the enemy could never compensate for the king's loss. Okay. So sold to the other nations as slaves. So you're selling the Jewish people to the enemy, to the others as slaves. However, the enemy could never compensate for the king's loss. The king's loss would be the Jewish people. And no matter what compensation the buyers, the enemy, would give to the king, it would never be an equal compensation. So basically she's saying, I would have held my tongue if you sold me into slavery, but the compensation you would get for us, it's never going to match us. Jews are awesome. We're awesome. No matter how much money they give you, it's not going to top us. That's what she was saying.
Who is he? And where is he who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing?
It can't just be. It's probably not on his mind.
Is this wicked Haman?
So Haman was terrified before the king and queen. Then the king arose in his wrath
because the king knew that what Haman wanted to kill. Haman wanted to kill the Jews. So
the banquet of wine and went into the palace garden. But Haman stood before Queen Esther, pleading for his life. for he saw that evil was determined against him by the king. When the king returned from the palace garden to the place of the banquet of wine...
But I also thought earlier that it doesn't make any sense for the king to want to kill all the Jews. You know? Persia was the one that freed the captives out of Babylon. The Jewish captives. King Cyrus, you know, King Cyrus did that. And we just had the Persian kings, you know, with Nehemiah. Say, hey, you know what, you guys, you can, you know, I'll let you go and build your wall and all that stuff, build up Jerusalem. So it didn't make any sense for King Ahasuerus to be against the Jews. So maybe he didn't really know what was going on.
When the king returned from the palace garden to the place of the banquet of wine, Haman had fallen across the couch where Esther was. Then the king said,
Will he also assault the queen while I am in the house?
As the word left the king's...
Okay. Dang, yo. The king is mad. The king is mad. So Haman had fallen across the couch where Esther was. So Haman is, I told you, he's torn to pieces at this point. He doesn't know what to do. And so he fell on the couch, and the king is like, will he also assault the queen while I am in the house? Man, he is just mad. The king is pissed at Haman.
I am in the house?
As the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Now Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said to the king,
Look.
They threw a sackcloth over his head.
The gallows, 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on the king's behalf, is standing at the house of Haman.
Hang him on it.
Spider-Man soundtrack.
So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's
what a turn of
wrath
events
subsided.
for Haman. I want to check on chapter 3. Did the king really know what was going on? Let me look it up so you guys can actually see the text. Esther chapter 3. Then the royal officials at the gate asked Mordecai, okay, blah, blah, blah. Haman said to the king, okay, yeah, he didn't mention it was the Jewish people, but, yeah, I remember now. He didn't mention it was the Jewish people, but he said, you know, we're going to kill all these guys, right? So there is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all the other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. I'm sure the king had to know that the Jewish people have different customs than them. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of the silver to the king's administration for the royal treasury. So, even if he didn't know about the Jewish people's tradition, he knew that Haman wanted to destroy a certain people. He knew that a certain people was to be destroyed, okay? So, how did he process of elimination? Come on, king. How did you not know? How could you not figure that out after what Esther just told you, right? After Esther said all this, how could you not figure that out? Who is he? Where is he? Who would do such a thing? First of all, you should know exactly what this thing is, because you just signed off on it a couple chapters ago. And the guy who presented it to you would be that he. So, Oh, come on, king. I mean, the king's busy probably. He doesn't have time. He thinks he's like, I don't know, man. I don't know why the king didn't think.
On that day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai
That's
came
crazy
before
they
the
called him
king,
the enemy of the
for
Jews.
Esther had told how he was related to her. So the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. Now Esther spoke again to the king, fell down at his feet, and implored him with tears to counteract the evil of Haman the Agagite, and the scheme which he had devised against the Jews. And the king held out the golden scepter.
Dang, so it's not even at that point yet, right? Because he'd already given his word that this was to happen. So now, even though Mordecai is saved, and the king is upset with all this, he didn't, right? King is against the killing of the Jews now, right? She can't take it for granted that everything's going to be fine because the word has already been set. Dang. So now she's asking the king. I mean, the king is obviously going to be... Can the king take back his word?
Against the Jews. And the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king.
If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seems right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes.
All right, get to the point, lady.
Let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to annihilate the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that will come to my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my countrymen?
Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew,
Indeed, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he tried to lay his hand on the Jews. You yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews as you please, in the king's name.
Imagine talking like this, Just, it's so formal. Laying a backdrop. It's literally like laying a backdrop to your statement. It's like you're painting the background and then you're about to paint the portrait. In your phrase, what you're about to say. Dang. I mean, and speaking that way obviously would make you think differently, right? You process things differently. It's just interesting. I feel like, I don't know, it's just interesting to think about because today, people speak so direct. We just get right to the point. So that's how we think. We're fast. I mean, they're probably fast too, but it's just, just get to the point. But for them, they're just like, they build things up. And they take time when they speak. So that automatically, it the way they speak, it asks you to pay attention. Because you're waiting for the juicy part of what they're about to say, So it's just interesting. I don't know. Like the way they form their sentences, that'll obviously dictate the way you think. They talk about that in that movie, Arrival, where they break down the aliens' languages, the alien language, and there was they had this linguist on their team, and she pretty much said that civilizations their whole thought process can be broken down from their language, right? If you understand their language, you can understand their thought process and how they think and how they process information. So same way here, the whole exposition and to get to the sentence. I don't know, it's just interesting.
You yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews as you please, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For whatever is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet ring, no one can revoke.
So, see, this does two things. It's the king's decree, right? And it is coming from Esther. So it is giving, and the people are going to see this, right? So the people already give the decree respect because it's coming from the king, right? Because it has a king's signet ring. But it is written by Esther, who is a Jew. So it is also validating Esther, and it's validating the Jewish people because it's backed by the king. So that's cool that he did that. Because what can they say? They can't really say anything. Again, they can't be like, oh my gosh, look, Esther, the queen, is giving this decree. They can't really say that. Look, a Jewish person is giving this decree. They can't really say that. So it's because it's backed by the king's signet ring. So that means they have to be okay with the queen giving a command and a Jew giving a command. So you're killing two birds with one stone there. That's cool. That'll help. See, by allowing Esther to give that command, that's going to help the mindset of everybody else. I mean, the people were not on board with Haman, right, already to begin with, but those that had turned a leaf and were like, okay, I'm with Haman. I get what he's saying, and we should kill the Jews. That's going to help this decree. The way the decree was done, that's going to help them out. So that's cool that the king did it that way.
So the king's scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day. And it was written, according to all that Mordecai commanded, to the Jews, the satraps, the governors, and the princes of the provinces, from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces in all, to every province in its own script, to every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed it with the king's signet ring, and sent letters by couriers on horseback, riding on royal horses bred from swift steeds. By these letters, the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little children and women, and to plunder their possessions, on one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province and published for all people, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies.
Okay, so he didn't really go back against his word. He just added to the decree. That's interesting. He just said, hey, you Jews, get ready. You can fight and kill them. And he didn't tell them, he didn't say, don't go out and kill the Jews. He said, Jews, you can kill them when they come to get you. That's interesting. So the king's scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, the satraps, the governors, and the princes of the provinces from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces in all. To every province in its own script. That's a lot of scripts. To every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed it with the king's signet ring, and sent letters by couriers on horseback, riding on royal horses, bred from swift steeds. I'm also curious as to how distinct these cultures were. Right? Like, was India, like how, like, did they have their gods and all that stuff by then? I don't know. Like, how distinct were these cultures? I mean, I'm pretty sure that they're probably pretty developed by then, probably by now, right? Because we've seen so many different gods and all that stuff. I mean, we've been sticking closely to the Jewish people, so we haven't seen the development of the world around that. But it would be interesting to see how everybody developed. From the Tower of Babel, everybody spread out, and then how slowly everybody developed. That would be interesting to look at. By these letters, the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of people or provinces that would assault them, both little children and women, to plunder their possessions on one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. On the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, a copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province and published for all people, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. I'm pretty sure that would also be, a deterring factor for the people to come and attack and kill the Jews, knowing that it's not going to be a cakewalk, right? It's not going to be a walk in the park. There's going to be some adversity, They're going to fight back. But do the Jews have the means to fight back here in this land?
Couriers who rode on royal horses went out, hastened and pressed on by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Shushan, the citadel. So Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, with a great crown of gold, and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor.
How? I mean, they still got to fight.
And in every province and city, wherever the king's command and decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a holiday. Then many of the people of the land became Jews, because fear of the Jews fell upon them.
So, that's interesting. They became Jews because they didn't want to be killed. By these letters, the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them. So they couldn't go around and kill people just for that, for no reason. So then many of the people of the land became Jews because fear of the Jews fell on them. Why would you fear the Jews? They're not going to come and kill you if you're not going to come bother them. Or maybe they're seeing the Jews in authority, and so fear as in respect, and so that's why they became Jews. Let's see what this Bible's got to say about the decree. 8:11. Some commentators understand this verse to mean that the Jewish people were given permission to slaughter even the wives and children of any people that would attack them. I mean, by these letters, the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or provinces that would assault them, both little children and women, and to plunder their possessions. Whose possessions? Plunder whose possessions? Their possessions. Who are they? Little children and women, all the people. Plunder annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little children and women, to plunder their possessions on one day in blah, 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 blah. Okay? So, that's what it says. Maybe you could read it as to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them. Who's them? Both little children and women. But then it says, and to plunder their possessions. So you're plundering the little children and women's possessions? No. See, it doesn't read well that way. And annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little women and children, and to plunder their possessions. I guess it can read decently that way, but to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little women and children, and to plunder their possessions. Yeah, I think that them is both little women and children. But why would the women and children assault them? Let me continue reading this commentary. Some commentators understand that this verse to mean the Jewish people were given permission to slaughter even the wives and children of any people that would attack them. Another view is that the Jewish people may not have carried out what was permitted, but killed only the men who attacked them. There is another possibility that the verse refers to the women and children of the Jews. That is, the assault mentioned in the verse was to be expected to be directed against the men, women, children, and possessions of the Jews. Against such assault, the Jews were to arm themselves and make proper defenses, plunder their possessions. This concluding phrase could be a citation of Haman's decree. If so, it would explain why the Jewish people did not take any plunder, simply defended themselves against their enemies. So in chapter 9, verse 10, we see that they didn't take any plunder. Okay, so let's break this down a little bit further then. If they didn't take any plunder, it says, and to plunder their possessions. Okay, so the people who are coming after them are going to assault them and plunder their possessions, right? So by these letters, the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives. So who is they in this? The Jews. To destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, the Jews. Both little women and children. And to plunder their possessions. And annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little women and children. Little women. Little children and women. And to plunder their possessions on one day in all the provinces. What do you guys think? Do you guys think the little children and women are talking about the assaulters or the assaultees? This is interesting. I wish I spoke. What was this written in Aramaic? What was Esther written in? Did it say at the beginning of my Bible? Or was it written in Persian? Yeah, whatever this was written in, I would like to read it in that language, so we can know exactly what it means. I want to read that one. I want to read this again. The Jews were in every city to gather. The king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little little children and women, and to plunder their possessions one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. Yeah, man. It could be read both ways. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about that. That's interesting.
Now, in the 12th month, that is, the month of Adar, on the 13th day, the time came for the king's command and his decree to be executed. On the day that the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, the opposite occurred, in that the Jews themselves overpowered those who hated them. The Jews gathered together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus.
I think, okay, actually, I'm gonna make a stance on what I think that verse is talking about. I think it is that the assaultees, the assaultees, the women and children are the assaultees, the ones getting assaulted, because they're going after people. The decree is that you can fight back. You can fight back against your assaulters. And why would women and children be fighting and attacking the Jews, you know? So, unless women and children were going around and trying to kill the Jews, it doesn't make any sense. So that doesn't really make sense. So I'm thinking because Haman said, kill everybody, right? He wanted everybody to die, right? The entire people to be destroyed. So that goes along with the women and children being killed. So I'm thinking that women and children were the assaultees. It was the decree, like the commentary said. I don't think that that interpretation or the decree saying that the king is giving permission to the Jews to kill women and children. I don't think that's the case. The decree gave permission for the Jews to kill their assaulters, and I don't think those assaulters were partly women and children, right? I think that they were just describing some of the people that the assaulters would go after. So the assaultees were women and children, partly women and children.
Who hated them. The Jews gathered together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm.
Ooh, this is a battle.
And no one could withstand them, because fear of them fell upon all people. And all the officials of the provinces,
fighting for their lives.
the satraps, the governors, and all those doing the king's work helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them.
Fear of Mordecai fell upon them, right? And fear of the king too. So they know they're not on the winning side, right? So even if they do overcome the Jews, they kill all the Jews, what's the king going to do to them next? Because the king is not pleased, right? The king is not pleased with all of this. That's also smart that the king didn't do the decree, even though it was with his seal, right? He didn't go against his word. His word was with Haman, and so he didn't say, "Yeah, you know what, guys, we're calling this whole thing off." He didn't call it off. He gave the Jews a way to defend themselves, and he didn't actually even do that. He told his wife to do it. So So he's smart with that. But yeah, so even if the assaulters, the people who hated the Jews coming to kill them, won, what was going to happen after that? So that probably instilled some fear into them as well, because Mordecai is not the you don't have the side of, you don't have Mordecai and the king on your side. So yeah, it's a losing battle. Even if they win, they're still losing. So
for Mordecai was great in the king's palace, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai became increasingly prominent.
This man Mordecai.
Thus the Jews defeated all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, with slaughter and destruction, and did what they pleased with those who hated them. And in Shushan the citadel, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. Also in Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Paratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Parmashta, Arizai, Aridai, and Vajezatha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, they killed. But they did not lay a hand on the plunder. On that day, the number of those who were killed in Shushan the citadel was brought to the king. And the king said to Queen Esther,
"The Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the citadel, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your petition? It shall be granted you. Or what is your further request? It shall be done."
If it pleases the king, let it be granted to the Jews who are in Shushan to do again tomorrow according to today's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows.
They killed his 10 sons. So you're just going to hang their dead bodies? And why do you want them to go out and kill again, Esther? Are they going to see any opposition tomorrow as well? No, I don't think so. So they're just going to go out and kill? See, now I'm thinking, okay, maybe it could have been the women and children could have been part of the deaths. That you add that to what and they did what they pleased with all those who hated them, you know? So yeah, I don't get what the point of this is. Are other people going to come after them again? If they're going to come after them, okay. But then I don't know. Let's see what this Bible says, 9:13. Esther renewed her original request for the Jews to have the authority to protect themselves against attack. The king assented. He also ordered Haman's 10 sons to be exposed on the gallows. The men were already dead. Their bodies were displayed as a warning to anyone who planned evil towards the Jews. Okay, so it could be that if they were being attacked again, they could protect themselves. That could be.
The son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, they killed. But killed in Shushan.
To do again tomorrow according to today's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows.
So the king commanded this to be done. The decree was issued in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. And the Jews who were in Shushan gathered together again on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and killed 300 men at Shushan, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. The remainder of the Jews in the king's province.
See, the fear was instilled in the men, right? In the people that were attacking. The fear of the Jewish people. And they killed 500 the first day. So you're telling me even after all that fear instilling Mordecai and all that stuff, you killed another 300 the next day? 300 people more attacked and you killed 300 more? I guess. I'm just hoping that they didn't just go around and kill people that were on that side, you know? Even if they didn't attack.
Gathered together and protected their lives, had rest from their enemies, and killed 75,000 of their enemies.
The remainder of the Jews in the king's provinces gathered together and protected their lives, had rest from their enemies, and killed 75,000 of their enemies. Okay, so this is reiterating that they're just protecting themselves. So yeah, maybe they were attacked by 300 more men in Shushan.
But they did not lay a hand on the plunder. This was on the 13th day of the month of Adar. And on the 14th of the month they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews who were in Shushan assembled together on the 13th day, as well as on the 14th. And on the 15th of the month they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages who dwelt in the unwalled towns celebrated the 14th day of the month of Adar with gladness and feasting as a holiday, and for sending presents to one another. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters to all the Jews, near and far, who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, to establish among them that they should celebrate yearly the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar.
Okay, what was the month of Adar again? In Jewish holidays, the month of Adar. The 12th month sequence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So is this sound kind of like a part of Hanukkah or something? Rosh Chodesh. The abundance of joy in Adar is primarily due to the story we just read. Is that what Rosh Chodesh is? What is Rosh Chodesh? The Jewish new moon. Okay, so it's not about... What is this? So what is this festival called? Man, they got Jews have a lot of festivals in wait, is it? Thus the following statements are true. It's Rosh Chodesh is 2 days, the first day of the 30th of Shevat, and the second day of the Rosh Chodesh being the first of Adar. Esther holiday. Let's see if that brings up anything. The fast of Esther. Oh, that's just Esther fasting. Hebrew month. Does it have the holidays on it? I can look up holidays in Adar. What's in the name? W joy, W fun. Oh, is this what it's called? Purim? That's the feast? I should have just looked at the subheading.
As a holiday, and for sending presents to one another. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters to all the Jews, near and far, who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, to establish among them that they should celebrate yearly the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, as the days on which the Jews had rest from their enemies, as the month which was turned from sorrow to joy for them, and from mourning to a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, of sending presents to one another and gifts to the poor. So the Jews accepted the custom which they had begun, as Mordecai had written to them, because Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to annihilate them, and had cast Pur, that is, the lot, to consume them and destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letter that this wicked plot which Haman had devised against the Jews should return on his own head, and that he and his son should be hanged on the gallows. So they called these days Purim, after the name Pur. Therefore, because of all the words of this letter, what they had seen concerning this matter, and what had happened to them, the Jews established and imposed it upon themselves and their descendants, and all who would join them, that without fail they should celebrate these 2 days every year, according to the written instructions, and according to the prescribed time, that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, that these days
it
of
is a huge
Purim
occasion.
should
They just
not
stopped the
fail to be
genocide.
observed among the Jews, and that the memory of them should not perish among their descendants. Then Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter about Purim. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim at their appointed time, as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had prescribed for them, and as they had decreed for themselves and their descendants concerning matters of their fasting and lamenting. So the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book.
The Book of Chronicles, probably. Oh, that's 8. Where's 10? "51 seconds.
And King Ahasuerus imposed tribute on the land and on the islands of the sea. Now all the acts of his power and his might, and the account of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was second to King Ahasuerus,
Wow.
and was great among the Jews, and well received by the multitude of his brethren, seeking the good of his people, and
It's like
speaking
a
peace
Joseph story.
to all his countrymen."
Boom. Would be even better than the Joseph story, because you have a queen who is Jewish also. All right, boom. We just finished Esther. Tomorrow we're going to get into a very interesting book, the book of Job. Some people think that Job was written even before Genesis. And if you guys know anything about the story of Job, this is going to be really interesting. So hope you guys enjoyed today's reading. Check back tomorrow for the book of Job. I'll see you guys then, all right? And hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.